Welcome back to the Wickedly Branded podcast. I'm Beverly Cornell, and today we're walking into chapter 2 of the Marketing for Entrepreneurs, a quick guide to sparking at your marketing. This is a book that I recently revised and put a lot of effort into. Some people call it a very charming book. It doesn't take very long to read, but it can be really helpful to give you a strong foundation for your marketing. Last week, we talked all about the spark, your spark, about coming home to your voice, about tracing that golden thread that has been running through your work all along. But today, we're going to shift into something that changes the emotional weight of marketing almost, I feel like, immediately. We're going to talk about what you're actually offering, because most founders describe their services in terms of some kind of format: coaching sessions, strategy retainers, web design, consulting hours, workshops, retreats. And format rarely carries the emotional gravity of the work itself. Let me paint a picture around this. A nutritionist describes her service as a 12-week meal plan program, structured support, accountability check-ins, and educational resources. Her client describes this experience entirely differently. She talks about walking into a restaurant without scanning the menu and panic. She talks about waking up without bloating. She talks about having the energy to play with her kids again and without needing an afternoon nap. She talks about feeling steady inside of her own body. These are two very different stories. One lists the components, the other names the change, the actual feelings the work can do for your client. When marketing starts to feel hard and heavy, what is often happening is a mismatch between what you think you're selling and what people are actually seeking. Service-based founders care deeply about outcomes. I know this. I'm a service-based founder. I serve. That's what I like to do. My mom's a nurse. My dad was a teacher. My husband is in the military, and service is incredibly important for me. But what I think is at the essence of the work is transformation, relational transformation. There's impact. And we know that if you could impact one person, you could impact, like for us, if we could impact female founders, that will impact their teams, their families, their communities, and have this amazing ripple out into the world. And I really believe, this is why I do the work I do, that will create, if there's more women with agency and legacy and money and power, this world will be far more soulful. So it's a very deep-seated root of like why what I do and I want to do. So this impact part of it is really important for our clients, the service-based founders. Because what I know is when you open up LinkedIn or you open up Instagram, you feel an immense amount of pressure to promote features and benefits. Somewhere along the way, the language, I don't know if it's because other people are doing this, so you feel like you need to do it, but this language actually becomes almost strangling. It tightens around you. And I see this in so many of our client conversations. She'll say something like, I help women build better habits. But when we slow down and we ask what that actually means, she says they finally stop apologizing for taking up space. That is a very different level of impact. And that is where marketing becomes extremely rooted and grounded in a way you've never thought possible. When your message reflects the shift someone experiences after working with you, it resonates completely differently in your body. People do not move towards information. They move toward belief, towards ways they can expand themselves, towards a connection or recognition of a person's story. And this movement happens very quietly. It's not some big bang that happens. Oh yeah, I'm going to work with that person. It's like a quiet recognition that happens. I remember we were working with a church. This was several years ago now. Their website described their service times and their ministry programs and the community groups in detail. It was great. Like all this information. The structure was organized. The design functioned pretty well, but something felt cold and distant. When we sat down and asked what people said after visiting for the first time, the answers shifted everything. They said, I felt like I belonged. It felt like home. We were seen. That language carries far more warmth and familiarity than service times. It reflected the actual lived experience of walking through their door. Once their website began to speak from that place, engagement changed. Time on page increased, inquiries felt more aligned, and people came in already feeling connected to the church. The structure remained, but the message, it shifted just a little bit. So your marketing carries the weight when it reflects lived change, the actual transformation you offer. And there's something deeper happening underneath all of that. When someone reads language that mirrors their own internal experience, their nervous system connects, it softens. There's a settling that happens when the thought you have been carrying privately shows up in someone else's words. It's a recognition that you can't even imagine. And this moment creates openness. It lowers friction, and it builds trust long before a sale ever enters the picture. This is why marketing rooted in solving feels so much lighter and easier. It feels relational instead of just a transaction that's happening. Okay, so let's make this more practical. If you're a brand strategist and your deliverable may be like a brand guide, colors, fonts, messaging, positioning, your client may experience something else entirely. She speaks on a panel, introduces herself without stumbling. She raises her rates and sends a proposal without rewriting it 6 times, and she stops scanning other websites to see how she measures up. The brand guide supports that shift. The shift is what she values. And here's where many founders hesitate in this. They worry that speaking about transformation feels like, I don't know, like super dramatic in some way, or like deeply exaggerated, or like way too emotional. Yet the clients who hire you are navigating real internal movement. Marketing becomes grounded when it reflects that internal movement without like grandiosity, like not inflating it, right? So let me share another example. One of my clients is an interpreter, and she works in medical and legal spaces, educational spaces too. Initially, she described her service as language translation. It's actually like ASL, American Sign Language. This was accurate, true, and very professional. All things that are not wrong. When we talked longer, though, she described moments where families finally understood a diagnosis, where parents felt safe in a courtroom, and where someone could advocate for themselves because their words were carried clearly across a gap for the first time. She builds dignity through communication. And once her messaging reflected that deeper layer, her confidence shifted. Her audience recognized for the first time the significance of her work. Referrals increased because people could articulate what she did in a way that truly mattered. She was solving, not just like dramatizing what she did. It's about naming the real arc of change that you create as a founder with your clients. When you sit down to write content this week, I want you to experiment with something really simple. Instead of starting with what you do, start with what your client is experiencing before they find you. Describe that moment in sensory detail, how it feels inside their chest, how they're breathing, how their muscles feel, what is happening in their day, what thoughts loop in their head over and over again in the background, what feels truly heavy to them. Then describe the shifts after working with you. What feels easier and steadier and lighter? What feels possible for the first time? You do not need mountains and paragraphs of copy to make this happen. You need one accurate sentence. And inside the brand magic method, this is part of our awakening and activating phases. Awareness of lived experience comes first. Structure follows, and visibility grows from that alignment. So when founders are only focused on activating, on building funnels and scheduling posts without grounding it in awareness, the message, it will never connect. It actually just floats out to the internet. Creates a lot of noise is what it does. But when you anchor in solving problems, your marketing feels like an extension of your work instead of a separate task. I have seen this pattern for decades. The founders who build sustainable momentum speak about the work as change, not as format. They remain consistent in that message long enough for recognition to build. And they understand that trust forms before the transaction actually happens. Trust forms from relevance, from connection, or recognition. So let me address something else that often sits quietly underneath all of this, I believe. Many high-capacity, high-performing women hesitate to center themselves in their marketing because they prefer to center their clients. They want the work to speak for themselves. I was the very same way. I wanted my outcomes to stand on their own. I feel way more comfortable delivering the work than promoting the work. But when you frame your marketing around solving, serving, you are centering your client's experience and not yourself. You are naming what they're navigating. You are reflecting what they feel. You're offering a sense of orientation for themselves. We talked about the spark as an orientation for you. And now this particular side of it is orientation for the client. So if you're fully oriented and they're fully oriented, that opens up the possibility for connection and working together. This aligns with service-based leadership so deeply. And it supports what I call ethical persuasion because it's based on truth, not some flashy marketing campaign. Neuro copy begins with safety. So if you read copy and messaging that is based on neuroscience, it always begins with safety. And when your content helps someone feel seen in their current experience, they stay. When your content offers a clear next step connected to that experience, they move. And movement feels very self-directed. It feels chosen. And it feels really grounded in what's the best action to take. That is the kind of marketing that just compounds your success. So before we close, I want to invite you into one reflection that has changed the way many of my clients write. Finish the sentence in your own voice. I help people go from X to X by doing X. Keep it simple. Let it reflect the lived change, not some polished tagline. If you want more structure around this, the companion workbook for Marketing for Entrepreneurs walks you through this exercise with additional prompts you can return to again and again. You can grab the revised Marketing for Entrepreneurs, the quick guide to sparking your marketing, the revised book on Amazon, or download the PDF and companion workbook through the link in the show notes. When you download, you'll also receive our weekly Marketing Magic newsletter and podcast updates, which gives you a space to continue this conversation way beyond this episode. And if you feel the pull for deeper reflection, the Brand Spark experience inside of Wickedly Branded creates a focused space to translate insight into grounded decisions. It's just 90 minutes of listening, some pattern recognition, and real direction of the best next steps you can carry forward immediately. As you move through this week, notice how you describe your work in conversation. Notice where language feels more informational, more mechanical. Notice where it feels more alive. That is your cue. Next week, we're going to step into chapter 3 and talk about messaging as magnetism, about the sentence that makes someone pause and think. That is exactly what I've been trying to say. But until then, I want you to choose what fits your life and stay with it long enough to see what grows. Wow, what an incredible conversation we just had. I hope that this episode lit a little bit of a fire under you to finally bring your brand to life in a way that feels true to you. Remember, clarity is the spark, but activation is that fire and flame that keeps your message and your visuals and your strategy aligned, and the confidence that follows. So does that lovely thing called momentum that you've been waiting for. So if today's episode, if you loved it, make sure you are subscribed to the Wickedly Branded Marketing Podcast so you never miss an insight or a conversation. Until next time, dare to be wickedly branded.